So the Muppets are a global multimedia franchise that basically needs no introduction. I mean, come on, we all have memories of at least one Muppet-related piece of media, whether it be revolutionary education programs like Sesame Street and Fraggle Rock, or slapstick comedy featuring Kermit and his ragtag gang of misfits. And to most viewers, the Muppets aren't really the type of property that could require an overanalyzation. I mean, in fact, the primary message of a lot of Muppet media relates to love and kindness and sharing and, most importantly, having fun. Therefore, it would kind of be arbitrary for some video essayists to go on and on about one specific facet of the Muppet franchise, right? Right? Sentience is defined as the awareness of feelings and sensations, a status that many organisms, including both vertebrates and invertebrates, occupy. In the Muppets and its related media subsidiaries, Muppet animals are typically depicted as sentient. However, not all puppet animals within the series possess the ability to vocalize or acoustically communicate. Realizing this was basically the initial root idea that led to this entire video. For example, the obscure Sesame Street character H. Ross Parrot has highly developed speech, equal to that of a human or non-animal puppet. In fact, his one appearance actually features him giving a speech. Sounds great, right? I mean, animal characters being completely sentient and humanoid, that's a totally common thing throughout all types of media. But take a look at this clip from Sesame Street.
But Ralphie can make the sounds of other animals. Ralphie? Hey, Ralphie, make the cow sound.
So this is, for all intents and purposes, an actual parrot, like a real life animal. But it is just made of felt. It is a puppet. It is, at least in the show, depicted as being a puppet. And this is just one of countless examples of this. I mean, one of the show's primary characters is Big Bird, who is a literal bird that is very human-like. And then meanwhile, you have Muppet animals that are in this kind of odd in-between space between being actual puppet characters and then just completely wild animals that are represented by a built puppet. Ignoring the obvious answer that this just doesn't matter since we're talking about literal puppet shows, here are a few possible explanations for this inconsistency. One, there's a distinct biological difference between in-universe Muppet animals and Muppet characters that just so happen to be based on real-life creatures. This could imply that there are a variety of felt species that inhabit the Muppets world, but not all of them have the ability to vocalize. 2. Certain Muppet animals are able to learn the ability to vocalize over time, but not all of them for some reason. And then 3, which is probably what you may have concluded based on the information I've presented, the Muppet animals lacking the ability to speak are actually just the in-universe equivalent of real-world creatures, while the Muppets are an entirely different humanoid gray area between animals and humans, which does raise its own questions. And I mean, before looking into things more, I could definitely see the third one being plausible. I mean, it is a puppet show, Sesame Street, Muppets, whatever you want to talk about. So it would make sense for everything to be made of felt and to be actual puppets. However, there's another complex dimension that can be added to this argument, one that totally destroyed my past beliefs relating to the franchise, and it's one that still leaves me questioning things to this day. There are actual animals in Muppet media, and I don't mean like Muppet animals, I'm talking real world organisms that are on the Muppet set in the actual media itself. Now, funnily enough, there is actually an entire page on the Muppet Wiki dedicated to the phenomenon of Muppets meeting their, and I quote, real-life counterparts. So, for instance, to keep the Sesame Street examples going, as it easily features the most diverse ecological landscape of any Muppet production, Bob shows Kermit Bullfrog in episode 277. And adding to the mystique, Bob actively describes the differences between Kermit and the real frog, with the former being misinformed on how, and I quote, most frogs live. That's literally the whole joke of the sketch. So, to create an explanation, I could say that Kermit was, in the Sesame Street timeline, raised in the city and blissfully unaware of quote-unquote real frogs. This is blatantly proven to be false in the version of Kermit shown in other productions, namely the Muppet Movie, where he's vocal about the swamp being his home. But it's important to remember that Kermit hasn't always been a show-running superstar. The sketch I'm referencing was filmed in 1971, years before the Muppet Show, let alone the Muppet Movie, were filmed. It's totally valid to think that at the time, Jim Henson's vision for Kermit wasn't fully developed and he was just a frog in the city who liked to give lectures. On the other hand, we could go with our previous assumed implication of Muppet creatures being biologically separate from animals. I'd honestly say this is most likely the answer to all of my questions, based on subtextual evidence and in-universe observations like the aforementioned Bob and Kermit sketch. Real quick, I'll bring up one last interesting point before closing this video. The Muppet Wiki actually creates further distinction between Muppets and quote-unquote real organisms, describing Muppets as being either representational or abstract. So for instance, something like Kermit or Big Bird, those are representations of real-world animals, while the monsters, Gonzo, the inhabitants of Fraggle Rock, etc. are just individual creations by the Muppet Workshop with little to no real-world comparisons, though there are some exceptions to that. It's also worth noting that humans are not separate from other organisms in this regard, as characters like Roosevelt Franklin or Statler and Waldorf are basically Muppet interpretations of humans. The implications of this are entirely unclear, and I think it's meant to be that way. I'm overanalyzing this way too much, but it's all in good fun, and I hope you got something out of me rambling about literal puppets.